Welcome to PandaAudioBooks, the perfect place for a huge collection of fantasy novels. If you enjoy my content and want to support my work, a small contribution via PayPal is greatly appreciated. And don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and hit the notifications bell to stay updated with our latest audiobook chapters. Chapter 356, How Unforeseen. Flood dragons are food for ancient flying rain dragons, who will chomp them down merrily. Meng Hao's flying rain dragon phantom flew through the air, its massive illusory frame shaking everything. Dozens of nearby flood dragons let out fierce shrieks that were filled with dread. Their bodies trembled, and they were about to flee in all directions when the illusory flying rain dragon let out another soundless roar. The wolves on the ground began to shake and then lie prone. The enormous blue lions also lowered their trembling heads and let out subservient grunts. The flood dragons seemed to be filled with despair. However, they didn't dare to move. Meng Hao's flying rain dragon phantom swooped down and swallowed one of them up. The battlefield was deathly quiet. Everyone gaped in shock at the scene which was playing out in the sky. The flying rain dragon swallowed one flood dragon after another. Soon, each and every flood dragon had been swallowed up, after which, the flying rain dragon flew back to Meng Hao and then vanished. Everything was as quiet as death. Meng Hao cleared his throat, and then proceeded along toward Xianxia. When he arrived in front of her, he saw her face covered with disbelief and dread, as was the face of the young man standing next to her. "I saved your life," he said, looking a bit embarrassed. "You still haven't paid me back. Before you do, is it really appropriate to go running off?" He felt a little bit awkward saying words like this to a young woman. Xianxia quivered, her beautiful eyes brimming with terror. In her anxiety, she wasn't sure how to respond. It was at this moment, however, that her eyes suddenly went wide. It wasn't just her. Everyone on the battlefield who had been paying attention to Meng Hao were now panting. A roar echoed out behind Meng Hao as a 90-meter-tall giant charged toward him, waving its enormous sword in the air. This sword seemed capable of slashing a hole through the air itself. A piercing sound filled the air as it slashed down toward Meng Hao. It didn't emanate ripples, but instead seemed to be sucking in the surrounding air. The mist surrounding Meng Hao began to churn. All of this takes some time to describe, but actually happened in only a moment. By the time Meng Hao finished speaking, the enormous sword was only about 30 meters away from his head. The sword in its entirety was around 300 meters long. The giant was 90 meters tall, and bursting with immense power. Although it didn't have a cultivation base, it was clearly powerful enough to cause anyone to shake in fear. The sword descended toward Meng Hao's head, causing the mist surrounding him to roil out in all directions. This made Meng Hao even more conspicuous on the battlefield. However, even as the sword was almost upon him, Meng Hao, without even lifting his head up, reached his right hand out and physically grabbed the sword. A huge boom echoed out. A massive energy shot from the sword into Meng Hao, causing his bones to creak, and massive cracks to appear around him in the ground. The enormous amount of energy even caused his feet to sink about 8 inches down into the soil. Meng Hao's expression never changed. He turned to look at the enormous giant. "Time," he said coolly, and 10 wooden time swords flew out from his bag of holding to form the lotus sword formation. It rotated in the air, circling around the giant. The giant howled and tried to wrench back its sword, but it was astonished to find that no matter how much power it used, the sword remained stuck in Meng Hao's grip. There was no way to take it back. The giant's eyes glowed with a green light as it howled. It let go of the sword and then curled its hand into a fist which smashed down toward Meng Hao. "Interesting," said Meng Hao with a laugh. "It would be a real pity to kill you." Tossing the great sword to the side, he retrieved his wooden time swords and then used the blood-burst flash to disappear right before the enormous fist slammed down. When he reappeared, he was on top of the giant's head. He pointed down with the finger of his left hand. "Righteous bestowal." Immediately, Meng Hao saw ghost images spring up everywhere on the battlefield. Visible only to him was strand after strand of chi which rushed to pour into the head of the giant. The giant howled, reaching toward Meng Hao with both of its hands. However, the blood-burst flash flickered, and he evaded completely. No matter how many times the giant tried to grab him, it couldn't, and he continued to use the art of righteous bestowal. This sight caused the eyes of all the onlookers to fill with shock. Receiving righteous bestowal is good fortune for you, if you keep resisting. He pushed his hand down onto the top of the giant's head, his eyes shining with a strange glow. He could sense the resistance of the giant's will, but also a desire for the demonic chi that he wielded. The twisting hesitation seemed to be causing it to hold back. Meng Hao could also tell that this giant was not like a human, but more like a type of animal. It had an enormous physical body, but actually couldn't speak out with language. Its sentience was quite limited and it couldn't practice cultivation. However, when it attacked, its physical strength was as explosive as the great circle of the late Foundation establishment stage. In some ways, such pure physical strength was actually much more frightening than cultivation-based power. Therefore, Meng Hao had decided to test out his art of righteous bestowal. He wanted to see whether his speculations regarding its effects were correct. As a demon sealer, he should be able to use righteous bestowal on any living creature in heaven and earth, give it his approval, and thusly, help it to become demonic. As the words came out of his mouth, the enormous giant began to shake. The glowing green light in its eyes was gone, as if suddenly, it could think. Its expression was no longer one of ferocity, but rather obedience. Now, it permitted the demonic chi to pour into its body. The Blacklands cultivators didn't understand exactly what was happening, but the scene was completely shocking nonetheless, although it didn't seem as incredible to them as what had happened moments ago with the flying rain dragon. To the Western Desert cultivators, though, what was happening caused their minds to reel uncontrollably. This was especially true of the 3 dragoneers. Their faces filled with unprecedented looks of disbelief, as if their minds had been completely overthrown. Their brains reeled to the point that they were complete blanks. A wild giant actually yielded. That's impossible. Wild giants never yield. Not even Grand Dragoneers can do that. Even our Heavenly Wilds tribe is only able to use them because of the special arrangement we have with the Wild Giant faction. Other than us, no one in the entire Western Desert can get a wild giant to yield. It doesn't have anything to do with cultivation base. It's like a rule of the wild giants. Their honor and their very blood won't permit it. So, what's going on? The Western Desert Dragoneers were shocked as they saw Meng Hao standing on the head of the giant. He wasn't paying attention at all to the chaos that his presence had given birth to on the battlefield, nor the shock with which people were looking at him. He didn't even notice how the mist he had created had risen up into the air and had transformed into a rain of poison. Instead, he was looking down toward the pale-faced Xianxia. "I've saved you twice now," he said with a smile. "You need to think of a way to repay me. Come up here, I'll take you home." The giant suddenly reached down toward the ground, placing its hand down flat in front of Xianxia. Everyone around her watched on as she stood gaping up at Meng Hao. Not even sure why she was doing it, she suddenly lifted her foot and stepped up onto the giant's palm. It lifted her up and placed her on top of its head, where she stood next to Meng Hao. Then, the giant howled and began to stride forward toward Holy Snow City. Up above in the sky, the 2 nascent soul cultivators who had been locked in battle were now staring at the strange scene which was playing out below. Meng Hao also noticed their attention. The giant charged forward, kicking up a fierce wind and causing the ground to quake. Soon, it neared Holy Snow City's protective shield. The cultivators inside had seen everything that had happened, and were now at a complete loss, not sure whether to open the shield or keep it closed. It was at this moment that war bugles suddenly sounded out. The Blacklands Palace and Western Desert cultivators began to pull back. That included all of the forces surrounding the city, the neo-demons and wild beasts. After the time it takes an incense stick to burn, there were no enemy forces visible near Holy Snow City. This initial probing battle had been intended to give both sides a taste of the other's prowess. The fighting had been limited to below the nascent soul stage. However, Meng Hao's appearance had thrown everything into chaos. The morale of the Blacklands Palace troops had been damaged, so it was without hesitation that they retreated. A great clamor of joy rose up within Holy Snow City when the Blacklands Palace retreated, although many people understood that the battle had just begun. As for the old nascent soul woman, She flew down to hover in front of Meng Hao. As she looked at him, silence reigned around them. The shield still had not opened. All eyes were on Meng Hao. "What do you want?" asked the old woman. "A frigid snow lava," Meng Hao replied with a smile. "What are you good at?" retorted the woman in an unhurried tone. "I saved her," said Meng Hao, pointing at Xianxia. The old woman shook her head. "That's not enough." "I saved her twice," said Meng Hao, his voice serious. "Still not enough." The old woman looked at Meng Hao calmly. Meng Hao hesitated for a moment. "I think I might need to save her again a third time," he said. "Even if you married her, it still wouldn't be enough," said the old woman coolly. "It takes a year to raise a frigid snow lava all the way to the lava stage. Right now, we only have 2 pupae left in the clan." Meng Hao thought for a moment. "I'm good with poison," he said. The old woman gave him a deep look. "If you concoct poisons for the frigid snow clan for a year, then I will see to it that you get a frigid snow lava. However, if I find out that you have some other motivations, then you'll never leave the city alive." With that, she gestured with her right hand, causing Xianxia to fly over to her. Together, they flew back toward the shield. Before passing through the shield, Xianxia looked back at Meng Hao. "Granny gave you her word," she said. "If you have any evil designs, heavenly lightning will exterminate your soul. You'd better watch out for yourself." Meng Hao smiled, and was about to say something when his face suddenly flickered. Without a moment's pause, his hand lifted up into the air, within which could be seen the Li clan patriarch's soul. A peal of thunder rang out, and a bolt of lightning shot down to slam into the soul embodiment. A miserable cry rang out, followed by vigorous cursing. Meng Hao quickly put the soul away. He looked around to see everyone, even the old woman, staring at him in shock. That was weird," he said with a slight cough, looking embarrassed. "How unforeseen." Chapter 357. Proud Sir Ju Holy Snow City was much larger than Dongluo City, and was divided into an inner city and an outer city. The inner city belonged to the Frigid Snow clan, whereas the outer city was for other cultivators. The cold climate led to frequent snowstorms. Because of this, the white, snowy scenery was something that you never saw in the southern reaches. In the eastern section of the outer city was a row of mansions, each of which contained a spirit spring. Although the spiritual energy they emitted was not vast, in the Blacklands, such residences could be considered luxurious. Each residence was self-contained, and was protected with spells to ensure that no unwanted visitors would be able to enter. Even more importantly, the protective spells were actually linked to the primary defensive spell formation of the entire Holy Snow City, making them incredibly powerful. The people who occupied these mansions were guests of utmost importance. Of course, this was also where Meng Hao's living quarters were arranged. His mansion and its courtyard weren't huge, but neither were they small. The wild giant currently was sitting like a small mountain, snoring gently. It would occasionally wake up, whereupon it would grab some meat from the big pile off to the side, pop it into its mouth, and swallow it down. If it ever woke up and found no meat around, it would open its eyes wide and roar. "Meat! Meat!" it would then say. Whenever that happened, Meng Hao would grudgingly run out and find some meat. It didn't take long for Meng Hao to start wondering which one of the two of them was the master. In addition to the meat-loving wild giant, there was also a middle-aged man in the courtyard. A look of bitterness constantly covered his face, as if he had a bitter melon stuck in his mouth. After feeding the wild giant only 2 times, Meng Hao decided to pass on that holy task to this man. He was none other than the Western Desert Dragoneer that Meng Hao had captured. Meng Hao had unsealed him, but had then forced him to consume a poison pill, preventing him from doing anything other than sighing and accepting his fate. One of Meng Hao's other requirements for the mansion had taken quite some time for Xianxia to manage to comply with. Eventually, she had provided an assortment of lotus seeds, which Meng Hao catalyzed. Now, the entire courtyard teemed with lotuses. Of course, ordinary lotuses could not grow here. These were snow lotuses. Snow lotuses filled the courtyard with beauty. Oftentimes, Meng Hao would stare at the flowers for the entire day. By observing their shape, he was able to sense their essence. By gaining enlightenment regarding the essence of the flower, he was able to improve his lotus sword formation. Such a life seemed strange to the Western Desert Dragoneer. However, Meng Hao eventually asked his name, as well as other information. He helped Meng Hao to understand what neo-demons were. And then, the heart of this middle-aged man named Jiu La grew cold, and filled with despair. That was because Meng Hao enjoyed studying. He liked to study blood, bones, flesh, and totems. Each time he studied any of these things, it was like a nightmare for Jiu Lane. Meng Hao currently sat cross-legged in front of a lotus. As he studied it, information about Western Desert Dragoneers spun in his mind. Dragoneers are split into 9 ranks, with rank 9 being referred to as Grand Dragoneers. Neo-demons are also split into ranks, and they are simply bizarre creatures that lived within the Western Desert, which eventually came to be called Neo-demons. After the ranks of 1 to 9 for Neo-demons, is rank 10. Those are referred to as earthly neo-demons. Rank 11 are heavenly neo-demons, and rank 12 are totems. A strange light shone in Meng Hao's eyes. Now that he had learned more about neo-demons, his understanding of the totems of the Western Desert was more complete. He was no longer completely ignorant. According to the legends in the Western Desert, the totems of every tribe originated from rank 12 neo-demons, which could also be considered heavenly neo-demons. Only neo-demons of such a high rank could become totems. After they did, then blood from their descendants could be used to draw totem tattoos. It was in this manner that totems were passed down from generation to generation. A large tribe would have many totems. A small, weak tribe might only have one. That was the origin of totems. You could say that all of the variety of different totems existed because way back somewhere in time, a rank 12 neo-demon had appeared. Just how powerful is a rank 12 neo-demon, thought Meng Hao. There was no way for him to know, nor could Jiu La explain clearly. He could only say that they were extremely powerful. As for the details, few people actually knew. In the Western Desert, many cultivators practiced totem cultivation. But the only people who could actually control neo-demons were dragoneers. In addition to studying totems, Meng Hao also continued to accrue enlightenment regarding the magical symbols in the celestial soil. He almost did it by second nature. If he wasn't engaged in some other research, he would spend his free time outside, trying to gain more enlightenment. Soon, he had been in Holy Snow City for several days. However, the Frigid Snow Clan had not once mentioned the matter of the frigid snow lava. In fact, they had also not mentioned anything about the concocting services he was supposed to perform. As the days passed, no one came to visit him. He was alone inside the mansion, almost as if they had forgotten him. He wasn't in a hurry. After his display of power in the battle several days ago, he was sure that the Frigid Snow Clan had plans to use him in some capacity. Someone would come to call on him eventually. Furthermore, as the conflict escalated, especially when it reached the final stages, Meng Hao was sure that his poisons would only become more and more useful. He was the guest and they were the host, which would never change. However, as the guest became more powerful, the host would naturally be forced to yield some. Therefore, Meng Hao enjoyed the flowers, studied totems, and gained enlightenment of celestial soil. Meanwhile, deep within the heart of the inner city of Holy Snow City, the old woman sat cross-legged with 3 others in the Frigid Snow Clan's main temple hall. In front of them burned an oil lamp, which danced about in the cold wind, casting flickering shadows about the temple hall. Those 4 people were the 4 grand elders of the Frigid Snow Clan. All had nascent soul cultivation bases, and wielded much power in their capacity as administrators of the city. One of the 4 was a grey-haired old man with a moon-shaped mark on his forehead. The mark glittered as he spoke. I still disagree with Third Elder's suggestion. Matters pertaining to frigid snow larvae are very serious. Currently, there are only 2 that will be able to reach the larva stage. How could we possibly give one to an outsider? These 4 had already been discussing the matter of Meng Hao for quite some time. I concur with Second Elder, said a middle-aged man coldly. He had a grim expression on his face. First of all, we don't even know where that poison expert cultivator is from. His cultivation base is merely at the core formation stage, and yet he dares to boastingly demand a frigid snow lava. Most likely, he sees that Holy Snow City is teetering on the verge of collapse, so he figured he would come and try to extort things from us. In my opinion, we should just go kill him as a warning to others. Look, we've been discussing this matter for a while now, said the old woman. Whatever this man's objectives, for him to arrive at this particular time is obviously suspicious. However, in the battle a few days ago, he displayed powers that drew even my attention. Can we really shut the door in the face of such an ally? If we do, who else would dare come to our aid? Fourth Elder, you say that we don't know where he's from. But isn't everyone in the Black Lands a rogue cultivator? How could he even prove where he came from? Furthermore, I already gave my word. I won't go back on it. If his poisons aren't effective, then it won't matter. But if they help to assure victory, then the frigid snow lava will be his. Her voice was calm but powerful. The main temple hall was silent for a while. The only elder who hadn't spoken so far was First Elder. He had white hair and ancient features. He was short and stooped, almost like a midget. Finally, he opened his eyes. Immediately, they shone with a bright glow, causing the main temple hall to instantly grow brighter. It even seemed to suppress the light emanating from the oil lamp. The instant he began to speak, all three of the other elders, even the old woman, bowed their heads. Very well, he said. You three have been debating the subject for quite a while now. Before we make any decisions, let's wait until Sir Ju can identify the poison in that blood. Time passed by. 4 hours later, footsteps could suddenly be heard in the temple hall. The 4 elders lifted their heads to see an old man approaching. He wore a long black robe, and his face was filled with an expression of pride. As he walked toward them, he was followed cautiously by 2 young women. Their eyes glowed with fervent respect, as if a single word from this man could cause them to do anything. As the old man entered the temple hall, 2nd, 3rd and 4th elders all rose to their feet, smiles filling their faces. Sir Ju, they said in greeting. Greetings, fellow Taoists, said Sir Ju in a cool tone. His expression was haughty, as it usually was. His features were not ancient, instead, his face shone with a healthy glow. Arrogance seemed to radiate off of him. Obviously, he was used to occupying a lofty position, or at least, was used to people flattering him. Were Meng Hao present, he would be incredibly shocked. He would recognize this old man. It was none other than East Pill Division Furnace Lord Ju Deccan, who had been captured and taken to the Black Lands. Despite their rocky start, Meng Hao had eventually developed a good relationship with Old Man Ju, and the two of them eventually became good friends. He had taken Meng Hao to visit quite a few cultivator clans, where they had been waited upon hand and foot like royalty. The look on the man's face right now was similar to how it had been back then. His capture had worried Meng Hao, to the extent that after arriving in the Blacklands, he'd made some inquiries. However, no information had ever turned up. He had always assumed that Ju Deccan was being tormented in some unknown location in the Blacklands. However, it seemed that in all aspects, Ju Deccan was even better off now than before. His aged appearance from before had been replaced by a ruddy glow. From the respectful, shy glances being given to him by the 2 young girls, it was clear that Old Man Ju was like an old tree that had suddenly blossomed. Blossomed again and again. Sir Ju, how goes the poison research? Said the first elder with a smile. He remained seated cross-legged, but his expression was one of courtesy. He spoke to him as if he were an equal, despite the fact that Ju Deccan was only of the late Foundation establishment stage. Considering the level of my Tao of Alchemy, responded Ju Deccan proudly, there are only 2 people under heaven who can exceed me. One is my master, whom you all know of, Grandmaster Pill Demon. The other is my junior brother Fang Mu. Other than these 2, I dare anyone to claim to be above me. He waved his hand, wherein appeared a jade bottle. This poisoned blood you gave me is definitely extraordinary. It took several days of thorough research before I was able to completely understand it. In any other location, this person could be considered a chosen of heaven. However, in my view, he's little more than a master alchemist. I could disintegrate his poison with a single breath. This man should know that the Tao of poison is not so simple of a subject. When it comes to the elite of the Tao of alchemy, there is only one person in the world whom I admire. That is none other than my junior brother Fang Mu. When his bedevilment pill appeared, the name of Grandmaster Pill Cauldron rose up. He could be considered the patriarch of all poisons in existence. He ended his speech with his jaw set proudly. Clearly, Ju Decan was implying that if his junior brother was so incredible, then his own power could only be imagined. Serious and courteous expressions covered the faces of elders, with the exception of the first elder. Behind him, the two young girls gazed at him with looks of adoration. Chapter 358. The Renown of Pill Cauldron. I am fascinated by the illustrious Tao of alchemy of Grandmaster Pill Cauldron, said the old man with the moon-shaped seal on his forehead. Unfortunately, I have never been fortunate enough to be able to travel to the southern domain to pay him my respects. His expression was sincere. Obviously he had heard of Grandmaster Pill Cauldron, but not the events which had occurred at the Rebirth Cave. Fourth elder smiled and politely said, as a distinguished apprentice of Grandmaster Pill Demon, and elder brother of Grandmaster Pill Cauldron, your Tao of alchemy can shake the heavens and rock the earth. I truly admire you, sir, truly. With you here, Grandmaster, Holy Snow City will never fall. Ju Decan laughed. Inwardly, he felt a bit emotional. Back in the southern domain, he could never have been so openly arrogant. But this was the backwater Black Lands, a place where continued existence was predicated by respect. Modesty was completely out of the question. Ju Decan had learned this lesson the hard way. So right now, he nodded proudly, indicating that the praise of him just now was absolutely correct. In his heart, he sighed as he thought back to the despair he had felt after having been taken to the Black Lands. He thought of his bitterness at realizing he would never be able to return to his sect. There had been no one to serve him, and no cultivator clans to give him gifts and take care of him. At that time, his life had seemed as grey as ash. How could he ever have imagined that after the suffering would come happiness? He had managed to turn things around. He had been taken here because the people here viewed him almost like a treasure. After randomly concocting some medicinal pills, the locals had been shocked. He was provided with food and drink, and anything else he desired. He was even given 2 young female companions. His life was suddenly very comfortable, perhaps even more than back in the East Pill Division. As he thought back on everything, Ju Decan sighed. He might never again be able to see his sect, and yet, that wasn't such a horrible thing. Thinking up to this point, he cleared his throat and then continued on with his lofty boasting. This crappy little poison is nothing, he said. Just wait until I concoct some of my own poison. I guarantee that those Western Desert cultivators will have no choice other than to give in. He spoke with an air of self-assured authority. First elder thought for a moment and then slowly said, if Grandmaster Ju is able to both dispel and concoct this same poison, then perhaps we should ask that other cultivator to just leave. Second and fourth elders nodded their heads at this, and were just about to voice their agreement when the old woman spoke. I disagree. Sir Ju is clearly a Grandmaster of the Tao of alchemy. However, it took several days of research for him to determine the nature of the poison. Besides, I've seen the results of that poison myself. If we make the other cultivator leave, then we should really determine exactly how effective the poison is. Why not have a little competition between Sir Ju and this other cultivator? That way the man's true self can be clearly seen. She looked at First Elder. First Elder hesitated for a moment, then made a gesture to second and fourth elders indicating that they should hold their tongues. He gazed at Ju Decan. Grandmaster Ju, what do you think? Ju Decan laughed proudly. That's fine. I'm curious to lay eyes on this young mischief maker and teach him a lesson. I'll help him to understand that the Tao of alchemy of the southern domain is boundless, and that alchemists of the southern domain are unsurpassable. As he listened, First Elder nodded and smiled. He happened to very much admire this Grandmaster Ju. He had sampled the man's medicinal pills, and was confident that he was definitely number 1 in all of the Black Lands. Laughing, he rose to his feet with clasped hands, as did the old woman and the other elders. Amidst all the smiles, the old woman sighed lightly. She had done everything she could and had put up a good fight. At least she had done her best to pay back Meng Hao's kindness in saving Xianxia. Naturally, people were sent to notify Meng Hao. The date for the Tao of Alchemy consultation was set for 3 days later. News of the matter spread through Holy Snow City like a whirlwind. Everyone heard about it, both Frigid Snow clan members and outside cultivators. Excitement grew. Everyone knew the name of Zhu Decan. After all, during recent years in Holy Snow City, the reputation of Grandmaster Zhu was like the sun in the noon sky. In fact, it was because of Grandmaster Zhu that so many rogue cultivators had been gathering in Holy Snow City. Regardless of the price they had to pay, they wanted to sample his medicinal pills. Whether openly or in the heart, all of them took Zhu Decan to be the #1 alchemist in the Black Lands. Actually, many cultivators who consumed his medicinal pills were so shocked that they claimed Zhu Decan to be the ultimate grandmaster even in the southern domain. Therefore, Zhu Decan's name only continued to grow more illustrious in Holy Snow City. Unfortunately, this place was so far from the former Dongluo city that Meng Hao had never received any information about it. The news that Zhu Decan planned to give a consultation regarding the Tao of Alchemy caused quite a stir among the local cultivators. All of them planned to personally go watch the event, not only to cheer on Grandmaster Zhu, but also to see how pill concocting worked. This news was shocking enough. However, shortly thereafter word was issued from the temple in which Zhu Decan resided. Based on recent battle achievements, he would choose 10 individuals for whom he would personally concoct medicinal pills. This new bit of information immediately caused a huge sensation. As the entire city simmered, Meng Hao sat cross-legged in his courtyard, surrounded by lotuses, looking at the invitation card in his hand. A strange expression covered his face, like a smile, and yet not. Standing across from him was Xianxia, who was completely unable to discern his thoughts. "Hey, what kind of expression is that?" she said, trying to suppress her nervousness. She wasn't sure why, but ever since the day Meng Hao had looked down at her from his position atop the giant's head, smiled, and spoken those words, after which she had walked up in a trance to join him, well, for some reason she kept thinking about him. Actually, as soon as she had heard of the matter of Grandmaster Zhu, she had immediately run over to tell Meng Hao. "Nothing," he said with a slight smile. "I just think this Zhu Decan is kind of funny." "You," she cried, stamping her foot and glaring angrily at Meng Hao. "Zhu Decan is at the pinnacle of the Tao of Alchemy, the #1 alchemist in the Black Lands. He's even famous in the southern domain, the personal disciple of Grandmaster Pill Demon. He's also the elder brother of Grandmaster Pill Cauldron. Do you know who Grandmaster Pill Demon is? Have you even heard of him? People such as them are like chosen of heaven, and you don't even pay them any attention? All you can do is concoct poison. Aren't you nervous?" She was a pretty girl to begin with, but when she acted like this, it revealed another side of her beauty, as if she were vying with the surrounding lotuses. Meng Hao shook his head and smiled, a virtually imperceptible glitter in his eyes as he considered her words. A perplexed look on his face, he asked, "I've heard of Grandmaster Pill Demon, and I very much respect him. But who is this Grandmaster Pill Cauldron of whom you speak?" "You don't know who Grandmaster Pill Cauldron is," she replied, her eyes wide and filled with disbelief. "I guess I shouldn't be surprised. You're just a rogue cultivator, so you don't know much about the southern domain. I bet you don't even know anyone who's been to the southern domain. Your ignorance of Grandmaster Pill Cauldron is understandable. Well, let me tell you, Grandmaster Pill Cauldron is the #1 chosen in the Violet Fate sect of the southern domain." A look of adoration filled her eyes as she spoke. "His name is Fang Mu, and his Grandmaster Pill Demon's legacy apprentice. His Tao of Alchemy rocks everything under heaven. He's an amazing person who will be the stuff of legends in the future. He's an expert in poisons, and has a unique understanding of the Tao of Alchemy. There isn't anyone in the United Nine of the Black Lands who doesn't know about him. I have a dream that one day in the future, I'll be able to go to the southern domain and pay him a visit. I'll plead with him to concoct a medicinal pill for me." Meng Hao gave a dry cough. "You're exaggerating," he said without thinking. As soon as the words left his mouth, Xianxia's gaze turned dangerous. You don't believe me? You're not convinced? She glared at him with wide eyes. After he had saved her twice, she suddenly found that she was less reserved in front of him, and more open. You can disbelieve others, or remain unconvinced by their words. But you are not allowed to disrespect Grandmaster Pill Cauldron. Fang Mu joined the Violet Fate sect when he was 17 years old. When he was just an apprentice alchemist, he utilized the Violet Fate sect's East Pill Division techniques to cause a shocking scene. He displayed unprecedented talent, and caused everyone to be shocked. In fact, one of the East Pill Division elders personally endorsed him to participate in the trial by fire to become a master alchemist. He was the first person to ever do so after having joined the sect for less than a year. The way he became number one in the sect was something exceedingly rare from ancient times until now. Thanks to his absolute superiority, he was promoted to master alchemist, after which he created a bedevilment pill, which sent the entire southern domain into an uproar. Later, he competed with Grandmaster Eternal Mountain and produced a myriad strength pill, which was impossible to crush. That's when he became a furnace lord. By this point in her tirade, she really seemed to be upset. Her words came out in a rush. After that, he took place in an alchemy duel in the Black Civ sect. His Tao was shocking. Later, he received enlightenment at the ancient Tao Giza. He cowed the Tao child of the Blacklands Palace and slaughtered an azure-masked core formation cultivator, causing his name to ring out under all the heavens. Later, in the Violet Fate sect trial by fire for Violet Furnace Lords, he took first place in unprecedented fashion, suppressing Chosen to become a Violet Furnace Lord and the legacy apprentice of the East Pill Division. He did all that in only a few years. Do you really think you're better than someone like that? You really think you can measure up? Meng Hao stared at her in shock, his face a bit red. He felt somewhat embarrassed. To be praised and commended in such a way was something he wasn't used to. He almost couldn't believe that Xianxia knew so much about him. Could it be that she specifically investigated me? He thought. He cleared his throat again, feeling a bit complacent. He couldn't help but give a faint smile as he looked at Xianxia. The look on her face said that she would fight to the death if he didn't show respect to Grandmaster Pill Cauldron. If this Grandmaster Pill Cauldron knew he had a devotee like you here in the Blacklands, I think he would be very happy. He laughed jokingly. HMPH. Don't mock my love for Grandmaster Pill Cauldron. So what if I love him? He's my dream beloved. Meng Hao laughed. Now he knew for sure that for some reason, the incident at the Rebirth Cave was not known among the cultivators in the Blacklands. Perhaps the news hadn't spread, or perhaps the fact that he had left the Violet Fate sect and fled for his life had been suppressed. Chapter 359, Ju Decan and Meng Hao. Seeing Meng Hao's expression, Xianxia was about to open her mouth and say something, but then had a sudden thought. A look of pity appeared in her eyes. Sighing to herself, she thought, his smile seems normal, but is obviously covering up his jealousy of Grandmaster Pill Cauldron. It's so obvious. Then she thought about how he had saved her twice, and how he wasn't really very disagreeable in general. And of course there was the scene from the battlefield which kept playing out in her head. Her heart suddenly softened. She thought of Meng Hao's words and bearing from moments ago, and then realized she had actually embarrassed him a bit, which was why he had reacted in the way he did. There's no need to feel frustrated, she said comfortingly. Grandmaster Pill Cauldron is a rare talent in the world. Ari, don't let yourself feel discouraged. Meng Hao wasn't sure whether to laugh or cry. There was no way he could tell this girl that the person sitting in front of her was the very one she adored to the extreme and wanted to marry. Grandmaster Pill Demon's true legacy apprentice, possessor of the ever-burning flame, wielder of the alchemy Tao transmutation incantation, and superstar of the southern domain, Grandmaster Pill Cauldron. Xianxia quickly changed the subject. She had suddenly thought of a problem. Frowning, she said, "What are you going to do? If you lose to Grandmaster Ju, then there's no way you'll be able to get a frigid snow lava. Even Granny won't be able to do anything about it. Besides, there are only 2 young larvae that can be raised, and it will take a year. Otherwise, I would help you to get one. Except, I don't know how to raise them. She was about to continue when she saw the look on Meng Hao's face, as if something was unacceptable and he wasn't sure whether to laugh or cry. The look immediately annoyed her. Looking flustered, she stamped her foot. Fine, forget it, she said. If you aren't anxious, then what's the point of me being anxious for you? Her attitude was something Meng Hao had never encountered before. Neither Xu Qing nor Chu Yuyan had been so impulsive. He couldn't help but size her up again. What are you looking at? She said, glaring at him again, her young heart beginning to race. Without realizing it, she stood up a bit straighter and put on a menacing expression. I'm looking at you, beautiful, replied Meng Hao with a laugh, winking. You. Her face suddenly flushed red, and her heart seized with panic. She backed up a few steps, holding her tongue for a long moment before bursting out, You were just coming on to me. Meng Hao scratched his head, his smile growing wider. He suddenly realized that messing with this girl was quite amusing. He cleared his throat and was about to say something else when, suddenly, Xianxia once again spoke, her tone earnest. Granny told me that according to clan rules, anyone who comes onto a member of the Frigid Snow clan will be turned into an ice statue. The only other option is to commit yourself to me. Meng Hao gaped in astonishment. This was the first time he had ever heard of such a ridiculous rule. You remember that, said Xianxia obsequiously. You owe me a commitment. Her eyes flickered with craftiness as she stared at Meng Hao. Covering her smile with her hand, she spun around and walked off. Her slender legs, lithe waist, and perky rear end only served to accentuate her youthfulness, and gave her a profound charm as she stalked off. Meng Hao watched her leave, laughing to himself. He then looked back down at the invitation card in his hand, and Zhu Decan's name written on the top in flowing calligraphy. As he did, his smile grew even more brilliant. Very well. 3 days from now I'll go see this Grandmaster Zhu. We'll see whether or not his Tao of Alchemy has made any progress during his years in the Black Lands. Smiling, he put away the invitation card, closed his eyes and sat cross-legged amidst the lotuses. He meditated on the shape of the lotus flowers and sought enlightenment regarding their essence. The wild giant snored gently as it slept. Off to the side, poor Jiu La was butchering some meat to feed it when it woke up. A forlorn expression covered his face. He missed his life in the western desert, and yet, after hearing the conversation between Xianxia and Meng Hao, he was suddenly filled with the desire to see this mysterious Grandmaster Pill Cauldron. If I have to be a slave, he thought to himself, it should be to a chosen of the Tao of Alchemy from the southern domain. That would be fitting for the likes of me, Gu Lane. Oh well. Such a pity. Time passed, and soon it was 3 days later. Xianxia came twice to visit during the 3 days, but every time she caught sight of Meng Hao's nonchalant attitude, she got mad. Her last visit came on the 3rd day, the appointed day of the competition. Her face was dark as she stalked over, delivered a jade slip, and then left without another word. The jade slip contained a pill formula, a simple one. Meng Hao could sense Zhu Decan's Tao of Alchemy within the pill formula. Meng Hao wasn't sure how Xianxia had managed to get her hands on it, but obviously she wanted to give him a chance to study it so that he wouldn't lose too badly. She really is a warm-hearted girl, he thought with a laugh. He studied the jade slip for a moment before transforming it into ash. Then he rose to his feet and flew up to stand on the head of the wild giant. All right, let's go. Who knows, maybe I'll end up giving some pointers to Zhu Decan. It depends on how much his skill in the Tao of Alchemy has regressed. He shook his head as the wild giant suddenly opened its eyes. Looking a bit disconcerted, it rose to its feet. Its 90-meter height made it look like a small mountain. It gave out a loud roar as it reached down, grabbed a big chunk of meat, and threw it into its mouth. Meat. Meat, it grumbled indistinctly. Then it strode forward, out of the courtyard. Bells were sounding out within this region of Holy Snow City. As they heard the sound, nearby cultivators suddenly remembered that today was the appointed day for Zhu Decan to concoct medicinal pills. Immediately, excitement began to grow. In recent days, Holy Snow City had produced large amounts of magical items and techniques, a variety of cultivation necessities, all for the purpose in bolstering the resistance against the Blacklands Palace invasion. Such items were available based on achievements in battle. Because of their former status as one of the great clans of the United Nine, the Frigid Snow clan possessed deep reserves of such items. Everyone knew that Ju Deccan was going to concoct pills for 10 people, based on their battle achievements. The news had caused quite a stir. Now that the bells were ringing out, large groups of cultivators flocked toward Holy Snow Square, in the east of the city. When Meng Hao appeared on the stomping wild giant, he was quite conspicuous. Even people some distance away could see the giant's huge frame. Murmuring filled the air as the wild giant strode forward at top speed. It didn't need to fly. A single leap would propel it hundreds of meters forward. Meng Hao sat cross-legged on top of the giant's head, the wind whistling past his ears. Snowflakes danced about in the cold air. He paid no attention to all the onlookers. He simply transmitted some silent instructions to the wild giant, his eyes closed. Within the space of about 10 breaths, he opened his eyes to find the wild giant leaping over a frozen river that ran through the city. Then, they arrived at Holy Snow Square. The square had long since filled with hundreds of cultivators, packed densely in rings. The sight of the wild giant caused them to immediately clear a path. Anyone who saw a 90-meter-tall giant running toward them like a charging mountain would fall back without even thinking about it. The center of the square was empty. Considering his status in Holy Snow City, Ju Deccan would obviously not sit around waiting for anyone. As soon as the wild giant entered the square, Meng Hao's body flashed as he flew forward. The surrounding hundreds of cultivators' eyes were fixed on him as he soared over them, his expression placid. It was amidst complete silence that he stepped foot into the middle of the square. It was almost noon. However, snow drifted down from the sky like it always did, landing onto the bodies of the spectators and resting on their hair. Meng Hao looked out at them calmly as he waited. So that's the poison expert who will exchange poison concocting services for a frigid snow lava from the Frigid Snow clan. If that guy was in some other city, he might be able to make a big impression. Unfortunately for him, this is Holy Snow City, and we have Grandmaster Ju Deccan. On the day of the battle, Grandmaster Ju had reached a critical point in his pill concocting, and couldn't participate. That's why he didn't have a chance to show off the power of his poison like that other guy. The onlookers discussed matters for a short time before 4 prismatic beams of light appeared. 4 people appeared in the square, followed by dozens of Frigid Snow clan members. One was Xianxia, who looked over concernedly at Meng Hao. As for the 4 people, they were none other than the 4 Grand Elders of the Frigid Snow clan. First Elder stood there, as short as a midget, but emanating power from his cultivation base that seemed to suppress the surrounding cultivators. They instantly stared at him with intense looks of veneration. Second and 4th Elders, as well as the old woman, 3rd Elder, were all nascent soul experts. Their appearance instantly caused everyone to cease speaking. Meng Hao's expression was the same as ever. After the elders arrived, about 5 breaths of time passed before Ju Deccan appeared. He strode into the square, flanked by the beautiful young women, looking incredibly lofty. All of the cultivators in the audience looked at him with respectful expressions, smiled, and clasped hands in salute. Greetings, Grandmaster Ju. Many thanks for the medicinal elixir you provided, Grandmaster Ju. I had somewhat of a breakthrough in my cultivation base. Anything you need, I will provide as repayment. Haha, it's been a few days since we last met, Grandmaster Ju. You are even more elegant and graceful than before. Words like these filled the air, causing Ju Deccan to smile proudly. After entering the square, he greeted the 4 Grand Elders, and then looked superciliously over toward Meng Hao. What's your name? He said coolly, looking every bit a senior member of the Tao of Alchemy. Fang Mu, replied Meng Hao with a slight cough. Meng Hao looked at Ju Deccan, and couldn't help but sigh inwardly. He had been worried about the man for such a long time, but from the looks of it, he was definitely doing quite well. Hearing the name Fang Mu caused Ju Deccan to stare in shock. Chapter 360. Ju Deccan's treasured pill. Ju Deccan wasn't the only one to stare in shock. Xianxia also glared at Meng Hao angrily with wide eyes. The surrounding cultivators were struck speechless for a moment. Then, however, they burst out laughing.
Think more.
Don't tell me he's talking about the famous Grandmaster Pill Cauldron from the Southern Domain. Hilarious. This guy sure is insulting Grandmaster Jew. He really has some guts, and maybe some skills too. It's too bad for him that he ran into Grandmaster Jew. He'll definitely be outdone. As the laughter continued to ring out, Grandmaster Jew frowned and then gave Meng Hao a cold harumph. Ignorant rapscallion, said Jew Deccan, flicking his sleeve. It's hard to believe you dare to even speak the name of Fang Mu. He's my junior brother, Grandmaster Pill Cauldron. A proud look shone in his eyes. Clearly he felt that his status as Grandmaster Pill Cauldron's elder brother was a very prestigious one. Originally, I merely planned to teach you a thing or two about the Tao of alchemy. However, considering your blathering, you rascal, I will now help you to understand that the grandeur of the Tao of alchemy is not something to be blithely chattered about. With that, he lifted up his hand to reveal a small bottle. Contained in this bottle is blood infected with the poison you used the other day, he continued, his voice arrogant. I've long since analyzed it, and I have to say, it seems very potent, but is in fact quite simple. With that, he tossed the bottle over to Meng Hao. The first lesson I will teach you is regarding the liquefied poison in that bottle. You. Before he could finish speaking, his eyes went wide. All of the surrounding cultivators instantly went quiet, too, as their gazes locked onto Meng Hao. Even the 4 Grand Elders were watching him closely. That was because the instant Meng Hao caught the bottle, it shattered. A putrid, black liquid emerged, along with a mist, which floated above Meng Hao's hand. A moment later, a burning tongue of flame appeared in his palm, which instantly caused the black mist to dissipate. The liquid began to writhe, and after the space of about 2 breaths, had transformed into a medicinal pill. Everyone watching could clearly see the entire process. The black medicinal pill suddenly began to emit strands of red qi, after which, the pill turned violet in color. It was no longer putrid. Instead, a fragrant aroma wafted up from it which lifted the spirits of anyone who smelled it. Liquid congealment concoction, thought Jew Deccan, his heart thumping. He was shocked, but quickly began to rationalize in his head. It has to be some kind of trick. This guy is simply too young. Liquid congealment concoction is something that only Violet Furnace Lords can do. Meng Hao coughed lightly, looking a bit embarrassed. He really didn't want to cause problems for Jew Deccan. In fact, he was quite happy to be able to see him here. Liquid congealment concoction wasn't anything particularly astonishing to see. It was more of a method of extending greetings to another alchemist. Unfortunately, because of the situation with the G clan, and Meng Hao's lack of certainty regarding all the circumstances involved, he didn't want to openly be involved with Jew Deccan. As an alchemist, I won't denigrate your petty gimmick, said Jew Deccan, sounding very much like a grandmaster. In his best reprimanding tone, he continued, however, in the process of researching that poison liquid, I imbued it with no small amount of medicinal plants. I never imagined you would dare to treacherously use them to make a medicinal pill. We'll ignore your Tao of alchemy for the moment. Such tricks are unacceptable. The onlookers, including the 4 Grand Elders, suddenly weren't as shocked as they had been moments before. After all, they had very much faith in Jew Deccan, from their outsider's view. Jew Deccan was actually somewhat alarmed inwardly. However, he knew that this was the Black Lands, and he was a Furnace Lord of the East Pill Division. Therefore, he was fully convinced that trickery had just been used just now to congeal the pill. Come, he said, setting his jaw. Concoct a pill for me. Use all the skill you have. His tone was arrogant, but inwardly he had decided to use this opportunity to determine the true skill level of his opponent. Meng Hao gave a slight smile. He glanced at Jew Deccan, then shook his head and slapped his bag of holding to produce an ordinary pill furnace. Then, he produced some medicinal plants, which he tossed into the furnace. After a few moments, a green medicinal pill emerged. The fragrant medicinal aroma was thick. It was really just an ordinary medicinal pill, but it should have been enough to shock the audience. However, upon the appearance of the medicinal pill, the observers didn't look surprised at all. In fact, some of them even laughed mockingly. The 4 Grand Elders frowned, and the old woman sighed and shook her head. Xianxia also shook her head, then looked at him as if he had lost and she were trying to comfort him. Meng Hao gaped at all of this. Something didn't seem right. The green medicinal pill seemed simple, but it emanated a strong medicinal aroma, and was actually an 80% medicinal strength pill for the foundation establishment stage. That's your medicinal pill? Fine, I won't go too hard on you. However, I will now be forced to convince you what a true medicinal pill is. Zhu Decan was actually heaving sighs of relief inwardly. Meng Hao's Tao of alchemy had long since surpassed his by a vast margin. Furthermore, the medicinal pills Meng Hao created were not flamboyant. In fact, without holding the pill in hand, Zhu Decan would have no way to tell its level. His expression was tranquil and composed as he smacked his bag of holding to produce a pill furnace. This particular pill furnace was made from jade, and as soon as it appeared, it emanated spiritual energy. Meng Hao looked at it with surprise. Based on what he knew about pill furnaces, it only took a glance to tell that this one was beyond ordinary. The surface of the jade pill furnace was carved with auspicious animals. These weren't ordinary depictions, they appeared to be totemic, and obviously served some special function. Seeing Meng Hao's gaze caused a self-righteous look to appear on Zhu Decan's face. This pill furnace had been gifted to him by the Frigid Snow clan, and he was quite pleased with it. Despite the fact that his Tao of alchemy was only average, he was still confident in being able to achieve victory because of his consistency. With the addition of this pill furnace, his chances increased even more. As of now, his success rate would be at 90%. The pill furnace appeared along with a glowing red stone. After placing the pill furnace in position, flames leaped up from the stone to emanate out. Next, Zhu Decan produced some medicinal plants which he catalyzed to various degrees and then tossed into the pill furnace. The pill furnace began to glow, and Zhu Decan himself began to shine with a light that gave him a celestial appearance. He looked lofty, even holy. Anyone who looked at him would instantly be convinced of his grandeur. At this point, he definitely emanated the aura of a transcendent being. No wonder he's called Grandmaster Zhu. A single glance will tell you that his Grandmaster material. This is the second time I've seen Grandmaster Zhu concoct pills. Every single time, I'm shocked and filled with admiration. The surrounding cultivators discussed the sight, eyes filled with open veneration. The four Grand Elders looked on with slight smiles, nodding with respect toward Grandmaster Zhu. A strange expression appeared on Meng Hao's face. No one else could tell, but it only took a glance for him to see that while the pill Zhu Decan was concocting was exceptional, what was even more exceptional was the technique the man was using to make his body glow brightly. No wonder he's done so well for himself here, thought Meng Hao. That technique is really useful. If I remember correctly, he wasn't able to do that back in the southern domain. He must have picked up this technique here in the Blacklands. A buzz of conversation filled the air as Zhu Decan, his eyes shining brightly, slapped the pill furnace. Blinding rays of light shot out, along with a white medicinal pill. Immediately, a dense medicinal aroma filled the air, spreading out for dozens of meters in all directions. All who smelled it were immediately energized, and felt their cultivation bases leaping with power. People continued to gush with conversation. Now that is a medicinal pill. You don't even have to consume it to feel your cultivation base jumping. That pill is incredible. It's definitely extraordinary. In fact, it's even more potent than the last set of pills Grandmaster Zhu concocted. Ha ha ha. It seems Grandmaster Zhu's Tao of alchemy is even better than before. Even the Grand Elders were smiling and nodding, with the exception of the old woman. Meng Hao gaped openly at the complacent Zhu Decan. After a long moment passed, he smiled wryly, finally understanding why the audience had looked at him with such cynicism. Zhu Decan's medical pills had always been exceptional. After all, he was a furnace lord. However, his final movement in slapping the furnace had seemed to be filled with complacency, but in fact caused the medicinal essence of the pill to begin to emanate out. After the pill appeared, it was inherently weak. Less than half of its original medicinal strength remained. The other half was emanating out into the air. The dense medicinal aroma caused everyone to feel energized, and even experience tiny leaps in their cultivation bases. To them, it indicated that this medicinal pill was high quality. However, That just went to show how little Blacklands cultivators understood about the Tao of alchemy. Suddenly, Meng Hao came to understand that when dealing with people who didn't understand the Tao of alchemy, you had to be adaptable. Furthermore, he also realized that he himself had unwittingly made progress in his own Tao of alchemy. His medicinal pills were no longer as showy, but rather subdued. This was a realm that exceeded that of ordinary alchemists, let alone ordinary cultivators. He put away the green medicinal pill, looked at the glorious dew Deccan and, hearing the excited conversations of the surrounding cultivators, began to chuckle. It was at this moment that the voice of the frigid Snow Clan's second elder rang out. "Grandmaster Zhu, there's no need to provide further instruction to this self-proclaimed Fang Mu," he said coolly. "Any agreements previously made with this callow cultivator are now invalid." He looked at Meng Hao. "Because of the kindness you showed in saving Xianxia Shan, we will not look further into your trickery just now." Before the echo of his words could die out, the sound of piercing laughter suddenly filled the entire city. "So this is your frigid Snow Clan's alchemist? Wow, such an amazing grandmaster. You've even outshone Pill Demon. Except, everyone's laughing at you." 3 colorful beams of light suddenly appeared in the sky, sending out ripples as they flew down. 3 people appeared, and just as they seemed about to smash into Holy Snow City's protective spell formation shield, it suddenly opened. When the 4 Grand Elders of the frigid Snow Clan saw who these 3 people were, their expressions immediately changed.